Hi, it's me. It's another beautiful day in the neighborhood. A perfect day for a nice cool milkshake. So while making a milkshake, something happens that has never happened before. The blender is gonna go crazy, spinning so fast that it creates a real tornado of milk and fruit, and even flying spoons. But how did this happen? Well, let's find out. So I was just making a simple strawberry banana milkshake like I've done so many times before. But this time something was a little different. As I added the strawberries to the blender, I noticed one thing. They were frozen. Now, usually when you blend frozen fruit, the blades will just slow down until the ice crystals melt, and then they'll start spinning again. But this time, no, the blades kept slowing down until they stopped completely. And the reason for this is because the strawberries were so frozen that they jammed up the blades. Now, normally when you put something in a blender and it jams the blades, all you have to do is hit the sides of the blender to break up whatever is stuck on the blades, and then the motor will kick back in. But that didn't work. No matter how many times I hit the side of this blender, those blades would not turn. This had never happened to me before. So I decided to try something else. Maybe if I poured some of the other ingredients in, maybe that would be enough to get the blades moving again. So I started pouring in some of the milk, but after each pour, I started hitting the sides of the blender harder and harder. And at first, nothing happened. But then slowly, very slowly, the blades started to move. At this point, I thought I had saved it, but little did I know it was about to go crazy. Because as soon as I added the last of the milk, the blades started to spin faster and faster and faster, like way faster than they were supposed to spin. And it got so bad that the base of the blender started lifting up. It was like the power of the blender was too much for the base to hold it down. And as the blender started spinning faster and faster, I reached out to grab the top of the blender to slow it down. But that only made things worse, because as I touched the top of the blender, it started to suck in air, and it created this big vortex. And as the vortex got bigger and bigger, it started sucking in everything, the straw, the cup, even the spoons in the cup. It was like a tornado or something. Now at this point, I knew I had to do something because if this kept going, the entire thing was going to explode. So I quickly put my hand over the top of the blender, but it was too late. The pressure from the vortex was too strong. It lifted my hand up and then it started pulling everything towards the opening of the blender, even my arm. I don't know what kind of suction power this blender has, but it was strong enough to pull my entire arm towards the blender. It was unbelievable. And if I hadn't pulled away, who knows where it would have sucked me into. But as I pulled my arm away, I saw the most amazing thing ever. It was like a mini tornado of fruit and milk. It was awesome. But that moment of awesomeness was quickly replaced by panic because I realized that this whole thing was not awesome. This was dangerous. If this thing exploded, it would send glass everywhere. So I tried to think of a solution, but there wasn't one. There was nothing I could do except wait for this thing to stop spinning. And it felt like forever, but eventually the spinning started to slow down, and then finally it stopped. And as I looked inside the blender, I couldn't believe what I saw. All the fruit was gone. It was just this giant pile of whipped cream. It was like the blender had turned all the fruit into this foamy whipped cream. I've never seen anything like it before. And then I started to notice small pieces of fruit throughout the whipped cream, but it was mostly just this giant pile of whipped cream. And then I noticed something else. There was glass on the counter, lots of it. The blender had exploded and shot glass everywhere. I couldn't believe it. I've never had a blender explode before, but it was totally worth it because this whipped cream was unlike any whipped cream I've ever tasted before. As I was taking the whipped cream out of the blender, I stuck a spoon in, and then I brought it to my mouth, and I closed my eyes, and then I opened them, and I couldn't believe what I saw. The whipped cream had turned pink. It was like the strawberry had bled all over the whipped cream. It was crazy. But it got even crazier because when I ate it, the flavor was insane. It was the best milkshake I've ever tasted. And I can't even make it anymore because I can't replicate it. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was the frozen berries or the really powerful blender, but whatever it was an amazing combination because this was the best milkshake I have ever tasted in my entire life. Now I need to tell you, when I say that this milkshake was the best thing I've ever tasted, I'm not exaggerating. I'm being dead serious. It was the best milkshake I've ever tasted, period. And I was thinking, how can I make this again? How can I replicate this amazing flavor? And the answer is I can't. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was the frozen strawberries or the super powerful blender, but whatever it was, it created a flavor that was unlike any other milkshake I've ever tasted. But with all great things, they must come to an end. And unfortunately, this milkshake was no exception. As I was drinking the last of the milkshake, I suddenly heard a loud noise coming from the blender. At first I thought, oh, maybe it's trying to turn back on, but it was no mistake. The sound was getting louder and louder, and then it stopped. And as I looked inside the blender, I couldn't believe what I saw. There was this giant hole in the side of the blender. It was like someone had taken a drill and went straight through the side of the blender. I couldn't believe it. I've never seen anything like it. And then I looked down at the ground and I saw glass. The blender had exploded again, but this time it had taken out the counter with it. I couldn't believe it. I was totally shocked. I didn't know blenders could explode and blow apart. I mean, I've used this thing thousands of times. I've never had a problem. But for some reason, today it just lost its mind and blew up. I was kind of scared to touch it. I didn't know if it was still dangerous or not, but I needed to clean it up. So I grabbed the biggest piece of glass and I threw it in the sink. That's when I noticed something. The blender had melted. Like, I don't know if it was the explosion or the really hot milkshake, but the plastic on the blender had actually melted. I mean, I guess if you think about it, it makes sense. You put really cold stuff in a blender, then you put really hot stuff in it. I guess it's bound to eventually melt. But still, I've never had it happen before. I couldn't believe this was happening. And then I looked at the rest of the blender, and I saw more holes. The explosion had made multiple holes in the blender. It was unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. And as I looked inside the blender, I saw a bunch of small pieces of plastic in the bottom. That's when it hit me. All that plastic was now in the milkshake. I couldn't believe it. I had just eaten pieces of plastic. I mean, I felt fine, but still, that's not good. You're not supposed to eat plastic. Now, luckily, I had put a towel under the blender, so most of the glass had landed on the towel. But still, there was glass everywhere. It was a mess. And then there was the whipped cream. It was all over the counter. It was stuck to the wall. It was literally everywhere. It took me almost 30 minutes to clean up the mess, but eventually I got it all cleaned up and then I took out the blender. I took off the top part and then I put it in the sink. That's when I saw it. Inside the blender, there was this small little piece of plastic. It was like a little thin strip and I couldn't figure out where it was from. I looked all over the blender, but I couldn't find anywhere that it could have possibly come from. It was a total mystery. But then it hit me. I knew exactly what it was. It was from the straw. The explosion had blown the straw apart, and this was the only piece that I could find. It was like a total CSI moment. So with all the excitement, I guess it's time to make a new milkshake. What do you think? Well, then let's go!